Reading from the Upanishads, the ancient teachings of India, the original reads like this: lead me from the unreal to the real, one truth to truth, from darkness to light, from death to immortality. Okay. Since I've been at it for many, many years about the ancient wisdom teachings, I'm glad you gave me 2 hours. No, we didn't do it. About a half hour. I could be here for days, but we'll try to do what we can in a half hour. I have to go back a long, long ways in history. I guess what we would call the proto-humans, not quite human yet, but there was a consciousness in there that was leading to being fully human. And there were masters in the astral plane that the divine sent to guide us and give us what eventually became civilization. Over a period of time, as the consciousness did grow, more and more teachers from the astral plane started to incarnate and walk amongst us, and they still do today. Over a period of time, they gave us aspects of civilization, music, science, mathematics, agriculture, art. You get the idea. Always pushing and guiding us to a higher level of consciousness. Over a period of time, we began to develop our own masters and teachers. And that's where we are today. Now, to talk about the ancient wisdom teachings is more than one lifetime, but we have to go back just so far. And I concentrate on the Western, but again, you really can't separate Eastern and Western spirituality. So about a year ago, I was asked to give a talk down in Titusville to a group down there. So Don, can you talk about the Rosicrucians? I said, well, I'd have to go back to the Knights Templar. Now it goes way back before that, but we have to have a starting point, Knights Templar. And you can read about the history of the Knights Templar, how they were formed by the Pope to be the military form for the Pope and to lead the pilgrims from Europe over to the Holy Land safely. Well, it didn't take long before the Knights became quite popular, quite powerful, and this mixing of cultures in the Holy Land really changed things a lot for them. And we tend to always hear them that they were the warriors, but just like us, we have a military, but not everybody's in the military. The military arm of the Knights Templar, the Knights of the Temple, was a small percentage of all the knights that were over there. And of course, the story goes, they're looking for the Holy Grail and looking for different things in and around the Temple Mount in Jerusalem. And they did find a lot of really interesting things. Some they brought back and some they kind of kept quiet. You know, what the Pope didn't know about that. And so they mixed with the different cultures that were there. Was a melting pot there in the Holy Land in Jerusalem. They came all the way from China and all the countries between China and the Holy Land. And although we think of the Silk Road, maybe it's just a single, no, it was like the Mississippi River, many tributaries, many roads leading into the Holy Land. So they met a lot of people from different cultures, different spiritual traditions, and learned a lot. And we're talking Egypt, Ethiopia, all the countries in between, Near East, Middle East, Far East. They began to think, you know, Pope never told us about this stuff. You know, so they decided to bring back what they learned over back to Europe. But they knew they couldn't do it, you know, in the forefront. Pope would be very upset with them, which eventually did happen. And so they put a lot of it in symbology. So study of symbols is very, very important. Maybe you see the Dan Brown books about, he's a symbologist in those books and movies. And one of the things he brought back was architecture. Europe had never seen architecture like that, mostly from the Muslims, but other places too. And in the building of the cathedrals in Europe, they hired the stonemasons to actually build. They had the architecture, they had the blueprints of how to build these things. And so the stonemasons would build these great cathedrals. And the Knights told them, put these symbols right in there. You can look up Chartres Cathedral and you can read it like a book, a metaphysical book, if you know what you're looking for. That'd be one example. Well, the stonemasons finally figured out, why can't we be like, know this stuff? You know, we're not just going to build it, we want to know it. And that became the, well, they were the operative masons, they became the speculative masons, and today we have Freemasonry, which is all, again, using symbols. Because unless you know how to read the symbols, you're not going to steal the secrets of these people. So when I had to lead to talk about the Rosicrucians, I had to talk about what the Knights brought back with them. So let me see if I have notes here. I did mention that it might be smart to take notes. And if you don't have anything to take notes, yes, well, you're the note taker. She's the scribe for my class, yes. Always has a book with her. But if you don't, you can always email me and I'll repeat some of the things I'm going to say. It would be very smart to go online and find a person called Tim Wallace Murphy. He passed away about a year or two ago. Brilliant man who can talk for hours without notes and give much of the history that I'm talking about, but he names, date, places that I don't need to do with today. And so we follow the traditions that the Knights brought to Europe. For instance, one of the things that blossomed before, was before the Knights, but blossomed after the Knights brought this information back, was called the Gnostics. Gnostics. Now I have to go back a little bit. The word comes from the Greek nous, N-O-U-S, nous, which means knowledge. And from nous becomes gnosis, G-N-O-S-I-S. And those people were called Gnostics, G-N-O-S-T-I-C-S. And if you put an A in front of them, then there's the agnostics, the total opposite of them. And this gnosis, these Gnostics, it's one big umbrella term for a lot of disparate groups spread out over most of Europe. And although they might have different ways of expressing their beliefs, the basic thing about the Gnostics was that they wanted a direct experience with the divine. They didn't need priests, they didn't need rabbis, they didn't need this or that. They wanted a direct experience of the divine, which you've experienced and you're going to experience in India pretty soon. Of course, the church at that time didn't want that. And they did everything they can to dismiss the Gnostics because they were getting in the way of the church saying, you need to come to us for salvation. We need you from cradle to grave, and you have to pay your way to it. Gnostics didn't buy that. As a matter of fact, there was a group of Gnostics, I think they were in France, called the Cathars, C-A-T-H-A-R-S, I believe. Church spent 20 years trying to eradicate Cathars. I mean, kill them. Can't be sure that in 20 years they got every one of them, but they sure tried. Some escaped and managed to move to other parts. So we see that this history goes all the way back. Now, it doesn't start with the Knights Templar because this goes all the way back to the beginning. Like I said, there were masters and teachers teaching us. If I talked about this in the Eastern tradition, I'd have to use different terminology for the same type of thing. Part of this whole thing in the Western tradition, something called the Rex Deus. These are the families that managed to keep the true teachings of the Christ alive. And the true teachings of the Christ and the way they're presented today by the mainstream churches are really quite different. And they kept the tradition alive right under the noses of the people, say in the Vatican. Again, through symbology, through oral tradition, keeping the teachings alive. The Gnostics and the Rex Deus families did not care about who was born when they died, what they did in their lifetime. They only wanted to keep the teachings alive. An example of that, and I'm not knocking any religion, I'm just giving the facts. If you were to get a Bible that has the words of Jesus in red, and that's not hard to find, almost any bookstore, you can go online, just get a Bible with the actual words they say, with the actual words of Jesus. And if you eliminate the duplication, says from Matthew, Mark, and Luke, where he says the same thing, and eliminate all that, I'm probably going to talk more today than those words attributed to him, they say, in the 3 years. What they don't want to tell you about is if you go to the very last chapter, very last verse of the Gospel of John, where it's stated very clearly, Jesus did more things and said more things than all the libraries in the known world could never contain now, all the things we're talking about. So there's a whole undercurrent of teachings that are simply not available to the average person. I guess it's part of my job to put them out there. If we look closely at what the Knights Templars did, they became very powerful in Europe. They were like a whole nation unto themselves, spread throughout Europe. They owned everything. See, again, the military part was very small, but in order to function with thousands, I'm sorry? I thought I heard something. Thousands of knights, I mean, they were farmers and herders and bakers and cooks, and someone had to take care of the weapons and the clothing, and they virtually founded the banking system as they led the pilgrims from the west to the east. Rather than carrying money and be open to robbers, they would have they established banks along the way. And it's the same thing, we send money by wire. You don't send the money, you send the information, it's picked up at the other end. I do that in India all the time. So they're very powerful. And at this point, the King of France, he was jealous. The knights owned everything, very rich. And this king was draining his treasury for wars he was fighting. So he was going to trick the knights. He was going to have a little party and honor them, and then he turned on them. Now on television, I see these documentaries say that the king killed most of the knights, and that's not true. It was a very small percentage. The word got around, hey, don't go to that party. And they took off. And the knights then spread their information, again, using symbology, to different parts of Europe. Scotland was a big place. Portugal, North Africa, and many of them came to this country here. They were very good seafarers. They just took off in their ships and landed in the New World. It doesn't take much research to see that indeed they were here. I'm not quite sure what mark they made when they were here. I don't know if they established too much, but they certainly were looking for natural resources to help with their work. They may have buried some treasure here. The TV show about, what's the TV show? They're digging up this whole island up there, thinking they're going to find the Holy Grail and all the stuff, and they're destroying the whole island up there. And I know that's not where the knights buried their stuff. I ain't gonna tell you where it was. I know where it is, but the point is, they came here. And by the Knights doing their work, again, the Freemasons were a direct result of that. And the Rosicrucians were a direct result of all the information that came back that the Knights brought with them. Many groups under the title of Rosicrucians, and some of them, of course, in this country, one of them, and Freemasons, one of those too. But there were many Gnostic groups and metaphysical groups that sprang from the Knights Templar. They all had to work quietly. I should talk about this. We have a term called exoteric. And esoteric is the information they can put out as the cover story. It's not going to uncover a lot of sacred teachings. Church says that all the time. They put out what you want to hear, what's safe to put out. But the esoteric, the sacred teachings are very well hidden. And that's true. So unless you're part of that group, you're not going to get the esoteric truth teachings. Leading from the unreal to the real, from untruth to truth, and we just read it a little while ago. In order to fully understand the esoteric teachings, it's best if you develop your own personal consciousness. Jesus made a statement. He said, I will give you the understanding to understand the scriptures. And when I was in India in 2008, my guru said the same thing. I will give you the understanding to understand the scriptures. I'm thinking, how in the world is he going to do that? How do you get somebody that understanding? I'm getting pretty good myself. I don't need him. Guess what? Through initiation into the gnosis or the knowledge, I can look at, I'm not bragging, I'm just giving the facts, because you understand what I'm saying over here. I can look at scriptures, sacred texts, books of all kinds, fairy tales, legends. Even here, I told my students, I said, watch when you put the stones in. That's symbolic. The stone represents the Pingala, and the water represents the Ida. I would give a talk in, I don't know what I'm going to do in May, I think. We're going to talk about the power of Kundalini. When the Kundalini starts to rise up from the base of your spine, it splits into two, male, female, positive charge, negative charge, hard and soft. So like I said, don't forget to put your Pingala in the Ida. That's the symbology of that. I don't know if I ever told you. The land of milk and honey, in the ancient teachings, that level of Egypt was known as the land of darkness. It's represented down here in the lower centers of our etheric being. So then the journey to the land of milk and honey is up to the third eye, where it's, again, milk, liquid, honey, a little thicker, just like over here. And when the two of them join in the center of the brain, the structures of the brain known as the third eye, or the philosopher's stone, we call it the mystical marriage. The male and the female. There's the female, there's the male. And that is the birth of the Christ child within you. That is the second coming of Christ in the mystical teachings. You can believe whatever you want, and that's fine. I have no problem. But the esoteric teachings say the birth of the Christ within you, or the second birth, or the second coming of Christ, happens in your third eye, when the two of them join together in what's called the bridal chamber. At that point, you're an illumined being. You know the essence of who you are. So anybody can ask you, a teacher can ask you, who are you, what are you? Oh, I'm a friend, I'm a teacher, I work at the store here, I do this, I'm married and not married, I'm rich and poor, I health, no health. These things come and go. Who would call them impermanents? They're impermanent. They don't last. They have a beginning, middle, and end. The only reality going from the unreal to the real is the true essence of who you are. And I'm very pleased, Joe, to know that your church here is more metaphysical than a lot of your churches I've been in, and maybe even some other physical churches I've been in. I'm at home here. I can talk about things I can't talk about in other places. And so this mystical marriage and the second coming of Christ happens here in the third eye, which is structures in the midbrain. Two structures, but not all of it, is the either the pingula or what we call the pineal gland and the pituitary gland. Those two are working together, you have the mystical marriage. It's just a little funny story. We have something at Cassadaga called Gala Day. The Gala Day is 4 times a year. It's like our psychic fair. That's the last time I saw you at Gala Day, right? And those of you who talk on the mystical marriage, nobody showed up because I'm done with all that wedding stuff. I don't want to get married. They didn't understand that we're dealing with the internal structure of your being, of who you really are. Who you really are, the Bhagavad Gita says very clearly, was never born and can never die. Bhagavad Gita says, as far as the essence of who you are, we'll call it your soul, for lack of a better term. And knife can't cut it, fire can't burn it, water can't wet it. You're eternal. Now you can read about that, you can understand it intellectually, but until you experience yourself as a spark of the divine, we all still have work to do. How are we doing in time?
We have about 9 minutes.
9 minutes? 2 hours and 9 minutes? Oh, that's great. What time we're going to do? Again, I'm running more like a class, and you know, I like to ask if there's any questions. Now, because I'm deaf in one ear, can't hear the other, if I can't hear you, I've got people here that will interpret for me, and hopefully, so if you have a question for me, I'm perfectly open to it.
Does this have anything to do with the lost sea scrolls? The supposedly writings about Christ that were discovered but never really exposed to the general public?
Lost Sea Scrolls.
The Dead Sea Scrolls?
Dead Sea Scrolls, I'm sorry.
Dead Sea Scrolls, 1947 in Qumran. They were the writings of the Essenes. The Essenes were one of the mystical groups that was at that time, there'd be like Gnostics. Oh, Jesus wasn't a Essene. No, he wasn't. He was not an Essene. I'm tired of reading that. He certainly knew about him because his cousin, we call John the Baptist or John the Initiator, was an Essene. And so the Dead Sea Scrolls, they're still working on them. They're still trying to piece them together. They're little fragments, you know, but they tend to give a different story than what the Vatican is telling us. And I tend to believe that what's coming from the Dead Sea Scrolls is probably more powerful and has more truth because you're actually reading in real time what they wrote. You see? Now, relative to that, they said Jesus of Nazareth, you probably all heard that, right? Jesus, the city didn't even exist when he was alive. Go to your history. There was no city called Nazareth until way after he was no longer there. It was Jesus the Nazarene, and the Nazarene was very similar to the Essenes. So he belonged to a mystery school. The mystery schools and these secret societies are keeping the teachings alive. They're giving us the esoteric. They're giving us the truth teachings. If you look on my card, it says, oh, only the truth will set you free. Now, what do we mean by truth? Someone asked me once in my class, what is truth? I said, we'll have our little truth, our little small t truths. You know, I thought it was true my Bills are going to win the Super Bowl, and now they, you know, so I guess that wasn't true. But the capital T true, and we're stuck with words and grammar. Capital T true is that which is never changes. The universe is created in truth, in love, And all of these things have never changed. And it's these truth teachings that I'm involved in, and I'm trying to get across as quickly as I can today, because again, I go back to the masters in the astral plane who were guiding early humans. They couldn't do it by themselves. They gave them fire, they gave them civilization, they gave them farming, agriculture, everything. As we grew, we got more and more, and we're still getting it. And what are these groups called? Well, in the Far East, they're called the immortal ones. In India, they're called the rishis. In much of Europe, they're called the gods, or the demigods, or the titans, men of renown. In Egypt, they're called the gods. In the southwestern United States, the Anasazi. And every country and every culture has a name for those who came before. Wise men, men of renown, with another term. I haven't studied all of them, but I know this is the way it works. And again, we have masters walking the earth right now. Some are well known, some are working very diligently behind the scenes, and big groups and small groups that we're doing. So the Dead Sea Scrolls and the Nag Hammadi Library in 1945, that was discovered in Egypt, doing a dig, and they found, similar to the Dead Sea Scrolls, they found all these scriptures and texts and everything, which overturns the esoteric teachings of the church. About a year ago, when COVID was really right in the middle of it, I got a call from the Unity Church down in Titusville. I've done some work with them. And she was doing some Zoom teachings every Wednesday. She said, Dad, could you do a Zoom teaching a couple of weeks on the Gospel of Mary Magdalene? I said, no, because I know nothing about that. No, I can't teach what I don't know. I will teach the Gospel of Thomas. I'll do that. I said, okay, fine. So I did about 3 or 4 weeks of the Gospel of Thomas. And then, in the meantime, I was studying the Gospel of Mary Magdalene, and I'll just give a little bit before I have to close. At some point, Mary Magdalene approaches a couple of Jesus' apostles and disciples, and she's got this look on her face like, well, did Jesus tell you something that he didn't tell us? Why are you so happy? She said, well, it's not so much what he said, it's what he did. And I can't describe it. Does that sound familiar? When we have initiation, like I had in India, how do I describe it? It's what happened, not so much what was said. So it became clear to me, because I have the understanding to understand, he gave her the initiation into knowledge, the gnosis. Now the apostles and disciples are going, oh, don't believe her. She's just a woman. She shouldn't even be talking to her. She's crazy, man. Don't talk about it. That happens all the time. You see me here in England, oh, you must be crazy. You see Bigfoot, oh, you must be crazy. Are you crazy? Do you really test insane? No. You have the experience, personal experience, and they had, and we have the personal experience of the divine. And that is the essence of all of the esoteric teachings, the ancient wisdom teachings, is to cut through the nonsense, go right to the essence of the divine. We okay? Do you have time for one more?
Yeah, there's a question.
Yes, I know this gentleman here. Go ahead.
What do your guides, your masters tell you about the future?
We don't get too involved in the future. Okay? Sometimes for an individual, if I'm giving a reading for somebody, they might be able to stretch it a little bit, but you never know how to interpret it. One time I gave a spiritual message at Cassadaga to this couple. I said, I see you going to Hawaii. I ain't going to Hawaii. I see you going to Hawaii. A couple months later, I got a phone call. They moved to the street called Hawaii. So how do you interpret it? How do you interpret it? We try not to go too much in the future. We deal with, if the present is good, the future will take care of itself. One more.
So I understand, well, there's some rumors going around in the various religious communities that there was apparently these 3 missing years in Christ's life where it was not recorded in the Bible or whatever, that there was these 3 missing years. Have you ever heard about that? Anyway, the point is, some people are saying that during these 3 missing years of Christ's history, that he actually went to Asia Minor and studied the Eastern religions.
Yeah. If I got most of that, I think I got what you're saying. Isn't it incredible that in the Bible, there's 18 years that's not talked about in Jesus from the age of 12 to the age of 30, right? I mean, a master like that, you can't miss him for 5 minutes, you know, and here's 18 years. Research and history shows that he was in all those countries, most of it in India. There's records there in India. And he was 26 years old in northern India when he first said, "I am the father of one," who was known as Saint Isa. And when he rose from the dead, which we'll celebrate Easter pretty soon, he was with his people for 40 days. Then he knew he was leaving. He said, "Okay, Peter, I want you in Rome. Mark, you go to Egypt. Thomas, I want you in India." Thomas said, "What? What do you want to go to India for?" Because I was there before and I had it set up, they're waiting for you. And to this day, there's a Church of St. Thomas. His tomb is there, okay? And they know all about it. So again, they don't want you to know. I've been to India twice. If I can go to India twice, he can go once. You see? So I'm gonna hang around later. I'm sure there's other people I want to meet and talk to. You can, I'm gonna lay some, if I brought my whole library, this room would barely, what's room in this? Left over, 3,000 books. I brought some that are pertinent to what we're talking about today. I'll put them on the table. They're not for sale, they're for show and tell. Okay, you take my card, you got my telephone number, you got my email. So I'm gonna leave you now. Thank you.